Hello everyone, and welcome back to Professional Development. I put out a vote on Twitter, so y'all knew what weapon was coming this time. It was a vote on which spray shooter we wanted to do. Because I have along with us Dio, a former coach of mine and an expert in all things rat weapons.
Yeah.
You wanna know about the arrow sprays, the splooshes. He is one of their strongest proponents at any level higher than my own that I've seen. And since we voted on the sploosh specifically, that is the one that we're going to be talking about here. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, Dio, and then we'll get talking about Sploosh-o-Matic stuff.
All right. Hi, I'm Dio. I've been a competitive player since 2018 and solo queue rat weapon enjoyer. I've never really played Sploosh or any of the spray shooters in competitive in terms of tournaments outside of a few meme matches, which some people might have seen in streams. If you ever see me play quad Sploosh on stream, it's a treat. It's fun. But I've also coached a few teams here and there around the Div 3-ish level over the past few years. So I got experience talking about the game and explaining things. So yeah, that's what I'm here to do today.
Awesome. All right. So we're talking about the sploosh. Being a shooter, this is a lot closer to my wheelhouse than something like the Tentabrella, the Splatbrella were. Those were a bit of a trip. But the main thing I think with the sploosh here, because I know the general movement patterns, how to splat dash and whatnot.
Very important.
But it's primarily, I think, how you get in and where you're trying to position with this thing, because it doesn't have, you have to be close enough to like punch someone to hit them with this weapon, and it also doesn't really have a poking tool per se. You can kind of do that a little bit, I guess, with the curling bomb in some cases, but it's not really made for that. And the hammer is also very short-ranged. So dealing with anything that has any range feels very challenging. And it is some of your expertise on how to do that I'm very interested in hearing. So when you end up in a game just rolling out into a neutral position, let's say, what are your thoughts about where you want to go and what you want to do first? What's your general game plan?
So you kind of were head on like the biggest weakness with this weapon is has no poking tools. So right off the start of the match, you're not just going to be able to, throw a splat bomb the way you could in Splatoon 2 with the Sploosh 7 kit, or just do anything like range related. And so, yeah, you are going to try to get closer to the enemy, but how you do that is very dependent on a few different ideas. The first one is Sploosh is typically not the first engage to the enemy. So if you're like the furthest one up on your team with a Sploosh, you're typically just going to immediately die. You don't have the range to be able to do that. It's very easy to read a Sploosh and just outrange it and space it out if you're in the enemy's perspective. And so you really have to wait for something to happen in terms of what your team is doing. And so during that time where you're waiting for something to happen, you need to either help your team go forward. So think of like the role of a Splattershot Junior, where it's just painting for your team and giving them access to the enemy side of the map. Because once your team is able to go in and the enemy is looking at your teammates, specifically your other frontliners, then they're not looking at you, so it's much easier to get in. So that's kind of the first thing. It's really just playing around your teammates and having them engage fights, so then you can go in and do whatever you can with Sploosh. And then the other thing is, when your team goes in, you need to be ready to go in. And so there are some like sort of passive aggressive positions that you can take that don't necessarily give you value in the moment, like in the short term, but will give you value once your team goes in. So like think of sharking positions and whatnot, but it's like aggressive sharking positions, if that makes sense. So I'll try to like find examples of that throughout today's video.
We're looking at Clam Blitz, Wahoo, and Manta. Or we could do Zones, Flounder, and Mako, whichever you think would be better for showing off the sploosh.
So I would say let's try to do that Splat Zones rotation, just
Okay.
because Mako Mart I think is the most straightforward map in terms of being able to play Sploosh. Sploosh is very map dependent, I will say that. Or not very, but like I would not want to be playing Sploosh on Flounder's Heights. Let's just go with that.
Gotcha. So we're looking specifically for a Mako match. Mako match.
Yeah, or that Clan Blitz rotation is fine too. It's just Wahoo's a little weird.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's roll the dice, shall we?
Okay, so the map we didn't want, but that's okay. That's okay. Part of playing Sploosh is being very creative with your positioning, and so regardless of what the map is and whatnot, you still have to find those little niches and those little strengths. And so what I would say for this map here is you want to try to get on the wall and just wait for an enemy to get close or for a teammate to draw fire. Yeah, so that would be a good position. Yep. So right there is, you just met one of the very niche matchups that Sploosh struggles with. That in terms of like meta stuff or whatever, you won't encounter this too often, but you struggle against rollers and brushes a lot. Just very hard to fight those. But right now they're 2 down, and so one of the things that you're able to do with Sploosh is just help your team get into the enemy side. Yeah, so a flank like this is good. Exactly. And I don't know if the rest of your team wants to get in because you have a Flingza and a Reflex, but if you had a more aggressive comp, you could be painting forward and trying to help your team get in. Also, you're very close to hammers. That could be something very destructive.
Pay attention to me.
Nice. You don't want them to pay attention to you. That was exactly it. They're looking at your teammates and not you, so it makes those 2 kills really easy to get. Yeah, and then as soon as the enemies start turning at you, you just run away. You play like a rat, and you're not trying to take these long engagements. Exactly. Damn, you're a good Sploosh player.
Thanks.
One of the things you saw Gem do right there that's very good is the curling bomb. Even though it's not a very good poking or spacing tool, it's able to get you to different positions very quickly. Okay, nice. And yeah, one of the things with Sploosh is you'll die and get trades pretty often, which is fine.
That's what the quick respawn is for, but I think I'm running. Actually, no, I'm running my splash build, so that was something we forgot to talk about.
Okay, well, we'll talk about builds.
Yeah, this is got some special charge on it, which is fantastic for farming one of the greatest specials to ever be in Splatoon, right?
We can talk about builds here in a bit in terms of what you would want to run. Because it synergizes a little bit with another unique aspect of Sploosh that people don't really talk about too much, but...
Oh, good.
So yeah, when you're locked out, this is when the Sploosh is at its weakest. So, okay, good. If this was like a competitive match, I would be very scared to make that play that you just did, where you were the first one in. Because all it would have taken is the Flingza who's around that corner to just one-shot you, and you can't really do much. So I would have waited for missiles and whatnot. But that's okay. You're doing a great job.
Thanks. Oh wait, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a thought that matters. But yeah, no, that plays like that is exactly what you want to be doing with Sploosh. Playing under ledges, very useful against backlines. Maybe not Explo, because Explo's a bit weird. You can shoot under ledges pretty well. Yeah, so just run away. Exactly. Good. Don't want to be fighting that Flingza. You want to be fighting everybody else. Good, throwing a curling and then going in after the curling, not with it.
I'm not gonna push that.
Yeah, that's okay. You're drawing his attention away from the zone, and so sometimes, even though you can't kill people, you're still getting value. So one of the things that you should kind of keep in mind with Sploosh, or just for the viewers out there, it's not a frontline in the traditional sense, but at the same time, it's not a support either. It's kind of a bit of both. where sometimes you can run in and just skirmish and draw fire, like you did with the flings a while earlier. Or sometimes you are running in and getting a bunch of kills, like a Slayer would. But sometimes you are just painting for your team, because Sploosh does have a high amount of paint, and can't forget that. If you're just going in and fighting and not really painting for your team, you're being very selfish, Sploosh, which is not what you should be doing. Sometimes you should, but, you know, especially when you're locked out, oof, painting is very important.
I was not expecting that, especially since we had the zones capped.
Yeah, I don't think any of us is. Are you wearing Stealth Jump, Gem?
Yes.
You are? Okay, good. So that was just the jump marker was exposed because the enemies were on top of it. So here's overtime. You have plenty of time. So you don't have to force anything. You can just get hammer and use that to go in, honestly. You're very close to it. Yep.
Oh, I tried to throw it, and curling bomb came out instead.
Yeah. In a position like that, you kind of did what you wanted to. It's just you needed a team to follow up with you. Series won't get you the best teammates, and that's okay.
Okay, we got it done. We got it done.
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of like team comps, it's very useful to have multiple front lines that isn't the Sploosh. Like minimum 2 other front lines and then a Sploosh. So Sploosh is kind of taking like that support slot. If that's how people still think of team comps.
Gotcha. I only
Nice.
died 9 times. Aren't you proud, Mom?
Yeah, you'll die a lot with Sploosh, and that's kind of fine. If you're going positive, then you're doing your job. But I think just if you want to know if your deaths are getting any value, go back to your replay codes and see if you're just immediately dying when you go in. If that's the case, yeah, you're not getting tons of value from Sploosh. But if you're able to draw a lot of enemy fire for a long period of time before you die, even if it's just like 5 to 10 seconds, you're actually doing a lot because Splatoon is so fast that 5 to 10 seconds is enough time for your team to cap a zone or get their next special or move in and kill the enemies that are looking at you, whatever. You do get value from that.
So here's what I was running. And I'm looking at this now like, why do I only have 1 sub of QR? But what should I actually run?
So there's multiple thought processes in terms of build. There is the QR route, which I will say personal opinion I'm not too fond of because one of the strengths of Sploosh is that it is a very fast 3-hit kill once you get in, or once you're getting range to kill people. And so you should be getting a kill like almost every death, like at least a trade. So then your QR would never really activate in those cases. So that's why I'm not very fond of QR. And so the other option is, yeah, Ninja Squid, you're already running it. So Ninja Squid is pretty good. Don't think I need to explain that, but you're going to be swimming in a lot and you want to be sneaky with the Sploosh. So Ninja Squid just helps with that. And then other than that, Last Ditch Effort doesn't really do much for you because you don't have Splat Bomb anymore. If it was Splatoon 2 with Sploosh 7, yes, Last Ditch Effort was very important. Some other options is Comeback. Just so that when you respawn, you can get your hammer a little faster, and it just helps you, be able to throw a curling bomb and get your ink faster, or whatever. But it's not necessary. It's not like a very big kingpin in terms of the Sploosh's game plan. Stealth Jump, obviously, you need that. However, there is a second option, and that is for Rainmaker run Object Shredder. Because of the high damage and paint out or fire rate from Sploosh, Object Shredder can just insta-shred Rainmaker shields. It's kind of ridiculous. So that's an option to keep in mind as well. And other than that, you are running 1 to 2 subs of Ink Resistance, 1 sub of Super Jump, and you don't need the 1 sub of Special Saver, but you can, and the rest of Swim Speed. Just as much Swim Speed as you can tack on. And we're going to talk about why that is right now. So in terms of when we talk about movement between different weapons, right? You have your weight classes. That's one thing to consider. Your lightweight, your midweight, and your heavyweight. And then each weapon will have its own unique values. Like, for example, a Splash and an N-Zap are both lightweight. However, N-Zap has a faster run speed while firing compared to Splash. Now, Sploosh has something similar, not with the run speed, but with swim speed, where it just has a very high natural swim speed, despite it being a lightweight already. However, there is one unique attribute that they added in Splatoon 2 that nobody ever really talks about with Sploosh, and so I just kind of want to give this as a bit of a insider knowledge in terms of if you look at patch notes from previous games that are still active in this game. Sploosh has a higher acceleration speed when you're swimming. Meaning, if you're sitting still and then you start moving, you will reach top swim speed faster than any other weapon in the game, and this Sploosh is the only weapon that has that. So, what does this mean for Sploosh? And specifically your build. You just get a lot more out of swim speed because you're able to reach that top swim speed faster than any other weapon. So having a very high swim speed is pretty good. But then in terms of your game plan of how that affects the way you play, your survivability is much higher now because things like splatter dashing, like we talked about in the beginning, or main strafing and anything like that is much more effective now because if you stop moving and you start again, you'll get that speed up really fast. And if you're doing that over and over and over and doing a bunch of main strafes really fast, your survivability is like close to, not quite as good as like a brush is just running around, a brush running around, or a Tetra dually with its 4 dodge rolls. Very close. Not exactly the same caliber, but I always say this to people in that Sploosh is the jack of all trades. So it's kind of good at skirmishing, kind of good at painting, kind of good at slaying. Not the best option in terms of all of those, though.
I don't, I don't have a build tailored to every single weapon in the game. It's hard to find like a pure of swim speed or anything like that. But I have 1.3 right now, which is about as much as I could figure to put on it. And that's probably enough to like counteract Ninja Squid, I think. Maybe close to it.
Probably. I'm not sure what those numbers are. Because I remember since the change they did a Ninja Squid a few patches ago, I don't know how.
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is now. So we'll roll with it as it is right here. We've got our silly little shades now, and we'll see if we can get Mako Mart this time.
I guess I'm going to take a second just to talk about Ultra Stamp real quick.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yep. So the way I always think about Ultra Stamp, it is just a very powered up Sploosh. Because essentially, it does everything a Sploosh does, and blocks shots. Like really, that's the best way to explain it. Because if you already know how to play Sploosh, then Ultra Stamp shouldn't be the hardest thing to learn. Just a few like pointers I personally have, and there's probably a lot more that are more tailored to Ultra Stamp, but just a few that I have. When you start swinging at going into the Stamper Rush mode, or like you were saying earlier, the Donkey Kong mode.
Yeah.
If there isn't someone immediately in front of you, don't do a jump swing to start it, because that just stalls your momentum a little bit and leaves you vulnerable for an extra few seconds. Yeah, so what you just did there, if there was no one in front of you, don't do that. Just start going rush mode. Just don't jump and hold ZR. Yeah. I know it feels good to do that sometimes, but if you're trying to close the gap between you and the enemy, you just want to start that rush mode real fast. Another thing that you also want to keep in mind, since Sploosh doesn't have any ranged options, sometimes just using it and throwing it to get a kill is pretty good if you don't feel safe with getting close. And Hood, you have an opposing Sploosh here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, okay, Mako Mart. In terms of passive-aggressive positions, behind pillow and mid is alright. Underneath the stack and just waiting for something to happen there on the enemy side is also good. Bottom left, yes, very good. That poke there and then just running away. Perfect. That was good use of your Curling Bomb, of using it as an escape option. That's one of the reasons why Curling Bomb is actually not bad on Sploosh.
Yeah, it splooshed me.
Sploosh diff. Nice try, though. But yeah, taking those fights there on left is pretty good. It draws the attention away from the rest of your team, especially away from your heavy, so it gives heavy value. So yeah, it's pretty good. Here, you're close to your stamps. That's probably your approach option here for getting to the zone. And yeah, like moving as much as possible, that's really important for Sploosh's game plan. And
Trying to figure out what's going on behind us right now. Oh, great.
yeah, I think there's a guy right in front of you.
Wow, that was worth a shot.
Oh!
What? I didn't get them? Are you kidding me? I'm so mad.
Dang. I thought that was a thing. One of the things that you probably could have done there is the Ultra Stamp actually has a very good ledge option. Similar to how rollers are able to hit pretty far into ledges. Oh, nice. If you do a jump swing on top of a ledge, you can actually hit someone pretty far that's into the ledge. So it's probably something.
Ah, we still didn't get the cap there.
Cap, yeah. If you're ever solo queuing with Sploosh... Oh, or him. Oh, no. I always think there's like a glimmer of hope in matches, but... You're 3 down. When you're ever solo queuing with Sploosh, the game will put you as sort of the painting weapon. And so with the comp that you had there, you kind of want to be careful because you had 2 blasters and a heavy. Or, sorry, a machine, a blaster, and a heavy. Machine's basically a blaster. And so you just didn't have a lot of paint. So that's kind of... If you're going to be solo queuing a Sploosh, you need to recognize that and say, okay, I can't really be taking aggressive fights and drawing enemy fire because my team really needs that paint. It's only when you have like a decent foundation of paint that your team can already work with that you can then be aggressive and do what you were trying to do during that match.
Gotcha. All right.
But yeah, this is mostly like a solo queue thing because ideally, if you're trying to bring Sploosh into a competitive tourney scrim environment, you want to build a comp that already has high paint, even without the Sploosh. If you're relying on Sploosh for paint, just play another spray shooter, let's be honest here. Sploosh is really best when your team is already self-sufficient without it. So then Sploosh can go in and add an extra amount of paint, a lot of pushing options, and a lot of just ratty options. It adds that rat element to the team.
Gotcha. Jeff, the tear-stained NZAP user. Are they using NZAP, though? No!
No. There
False
is a
prophet.
solo queue player in X-Rank called Jeff. I'm pretty sure he's top 500 with Sploosh. So shoutouts to Jeff. I would very much like to know who this Jeff person is, but I always see him in Sploosh.
So point sensor, what do you do with that one?
Wait. Unfortunately. If you're ever point censored, really just wait and be passive during that time. Paint for your team and wait it out because in terms of rattiness, right? Let me talk about what rattiness actually means because I feel like people use it just as a meme term and whatever, but it actually does mean something when people say, "Oh yeah, that weapon is such a rat weapon." It typically means that it's a weapon that is able to take the enemy by surprise really well. So we talked about how Sploosh has a very high mobility and movement options. When in terms of rattiness, that means you can get close to the enemy without them noticing and take them by surprise. That's really kind of what it is. Or another way to put it is just be unpredictable so that your enemy isn't able to read you and easily just pre-fire to kill you. So yeah, if you're ever point censored like you are now and you're behind them, you can actually use that to your advantage and just force them to look at you like that arrow spray was. But yeah, unfortunately y'all weren't able to get close to the zone.
Yeah, not when we have 10 ticks left before KO.
Yeah. I think in a situation like that, you really want to think, okay, how can I get close to the zone without being noticed, right? And this is part of the rat aspect of it. Because sometimes you're trying to get close to the enemy or the objective, not to kill the enemy, but just to paint the zone. Because if you can neutralize, that does a lot for your team. It buys you guys time. Mm-hmm. And so, since I'm trying to say that Sploosh is a weapon that can get close to the enemy without being noticed, you can use that, not for kills, but for your objective. Which, for anyone who's ever faced a V-Sploosh and Rainmaker, you should know exactly what I'm talking about. The Sploosh that just gets behind you, picks up the Rainmaker, and just dashes with it when you're not noticing or not looking.
So wait for the enemy team to push up, like, even into our base, and then just be like, oop, stole the zone, whoops.
Exactly, yep. Or, even for tower control, you can just pick up or get on the tower, and then it forces them to turn around and be like, oh shoot, someone's on the tower. And then you can just get off the tower and go be a rat somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Which, talking about that for a second, the idea of moving around a lot and whatnot, uh, one of the things that will make you quote-unquote ratty is trying to be in multiple places at once, just by rotating very quickly. And this is what Curling Bomb allows you to do really well. You were kind of doing this in the first Foundry game, where at one moment you were like on far left, and then you're curling bombing to the opposite side of the map, so it's like, from the enemy perspective, he thinks you're on the left side, but now all of a sudden you're on the right, and they just won't have time to see that, and by then they're dead. So you can do that with the curling bomb. And
I find that's really useful for any frontline weapon. Like even with like a splatter shot, I can't do it as fast as I can do it on the sploosh, but I always tell people, like, if you've fired shots from one location, what's happening in between when you fire them at that location and then fire them again at that location is the opponent is getting their aiming reticle set on that spot and starting to pre-fire you. Just like assume that that is always the case, and if you have shown yourself somewhere, use that against them instead of letting them use that against you.
yes, and so this is one of the big parts about the Sploosh's game plan, is it's trying to do exactly that. Yeah, and so one of the things for the viewers at home that you might have noticed now is I just gave y'all a lot of different options in terms of plays that you can make with moving around a lot, painting for your team, and just being very sneaky and whatnot. Knowing when and where and how to do that, it's really based off instinct, and it's one of those things that you'll just get better at the more you play Sploosh. There is no set answer, there is no like golden trick that I can give you. It's really just learn the positioning, learn kind of to feel your way into different situations. And yeah, like how Jem is doing here, where he was on the right side, now he's on left. Like, being able to do that and know when to do that and how to do that, that's something that just comes with time and experience. Perfect! Yeah! Yeah. Oh my god, Jem, you're getting really good at this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then incorporating Curling Bomb into everything that I just said. And, like you're doing now, the Ultra Stamp, and just using that to kind of be like, well, the enemy's expecting a Sploosh, all of a sudden, it's an Ultra Stamp. You can catch enemies off guard. Now, there is another aspect of Sploosh that I haven't really talked about too much, and that is the supportive aspect. I talked about it a little bit and how it can paint for your team, but there's one specific idea that FLC talks about that Sploosh does pretty well, like even better than a junior, arguably, and that it's able to accelerate fights really well. So basically what that means is it's able to get your team into position very fast. Just because of its high paint, high movement, it's able to do that. And then the thing that Sploosh does really well is then play off of that paint that you put down. Both with your Ninja Squid, using Ultra Stamp, being sneaky, and all that. It's a combination of everything, and knowing when to do those things.
Ah, I couldn't get there. Probably wouldn't have had time to throw it anyway.
Yeah, that's okay. Throwing your stamp at the very end of the Ultra Stamp is pretty good. So if you ever use stamp, you just want to try to squeeze as much value as possible. Just throw it. There you go.
That was T-Tech impulse right there.
Yeah.
Drop the bomb at my feet.
What I would have done there in that situation is before you even dropped, I would have just like stayed in that little puddle of ink on top mid where you were, and I bet you someone would have just walked into the zone and you would have gotten a free kill.
Gotcha.
And if they did see you, then you might have had time to drop and try to avoid them. Just try to survivability. Nice, very good. Yep, and that was also pretty good, just dropping the...
Oh, no. Ah, I fell. Ah, and that didn't throw it. I'm not used to that timing at all. When how long I have with it.
Okay.
Oh, that's a charger.
Good job not chasing that H3. Yes. Oh, nice.
Curling bomb.
You'll occasionally get that. Yeah, you can get kills with curling bomb. I will say that. I know I was kind of dissing on it where it's not as good as a splat bomb in terms of killing, which is true.
Mhm.
But there are some cases where maybe if there's an opponent below a ledge and you're on high ground, you can kind of like hold the curling bomb, or charge it, I mean, and then it'll like pop right below the ledge so you can kill them. There are some like very situational moments, and I encourage people to kind of lab those out and be creative with it. Another curling bomb?
That one was a little bit more intended.
Yeah. Nice triple.
Thank you. Ah!
Yes. I think that pillow was hiding it just before you.
No, it was your compliment. That was the problem.
Yeah.
You said
Yeah,
you
made
said
you
something good
blush.
about what I was doing. I had to go and mess it up. Oh.
I know you died to a bomb, and that was a different thing, but I'd be very wary of walking across that top mid with a plane sensor.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just as a sploosh, just in general.
How much you want to bet they don't see this at all? They didn't. Ah, got 2 hits.
Yeah. I think the big brain play there would have been to pop stamp, so you could have survived the other guy shooting at you.
Ah,
Or alternatively, drop to avoid the other guy and then peek that up to, back up to kill the super jump.
yeah. I was just hoping at that point that my team would be able to start pushing in, and then I looked up at the top of the screen and we were 3 down.
Yeah. This is if you're playing with a sploosh, so not as a sploosh player, but as the teammate of a sploosh, you want to be very wary of where your sploosh is, because if your sploosh is in the enemy side, flanking, the enemy doesn't see them, you're basically fighting a 3v4 until your sploosh pops their ugly head again. And so you have to be very wary of that. This is one of the reasons why sploosh is kind of not the strongest in solo queue, just because you're so reliant on how your teammates are playing around you and how the sploosh is playing around the teammates. So, yeah. Which, I guess, I'll try to talk about that a little bit more. I know I talked about it earlier, where sploosh is very reliant on having a frontline to engage fights for it, or initiate fights, and then the sploosh is kind of very good at going into a fight that's already initiated. What that kind of looks like, it's not the same way you would think of like a Slayer and Skirmisher duo. Don't think of the sploosh as a Slayer in that sense, or rather, don't rely on the sploosh as a Slayer. It can be. It's just that it's not as consistent as, say, something like a Splatter Shot. And so having a Skirmisher, a Slayer, and then a sploosh as the third weapon is very good, because the enemy is mostly focused or mostly scared of the Skirmisher Slayer combo. So that can be something like, you know, a splash and a machine, or a machine and a tetra, or a splash and a tetra, whatever. And then having a sploosh on top of that kind of makes it so the enemy's focused on the other front lines, and all of a sudden there's a sploosh here, and that's kind of how it takes advantage of the of your teammates. And then if you want to take this to the next level, is have the fourth weapon on your team be something frontliney or short range. It doesn't have to specifically be a quote-unquote frontliner, right? Like, you can play like an anchor splash, like is common in the meta right now, or something akin to that. But having a traditional anchor, say like a charger with a sploosh, kind of actually hurts both the charger and the sploosh, because the charger isn't able to do anything to enable sploosh to go forward, and the sploosh isn't... When you're in an advantage state, the sploosh is accelerating fights too fast for the charger player to really be able to do anything effectively, because the sploosh player is making it so the other two frontliners are able to go in really fast and take space really fast, while your charger doesn't really take advantage of that to the fullest. So having no backline, or a backline that's very fast, is very preferable for a sploosh. One thing I kind of said in the past, and I still believe this, is that even if you're not a sploosh player, let's say you're like a splatter shot player, if you struggle with playing sploosh, that's because, in my personal opinion, you haven't reached the highest, or you haven't pushed the skill ceiling in terms of how you're slaying, like getting close to the enemy and bridging that gap between you and the enemy. Because if you're able to do it with Sploosh, you can easily do it with Splatter Shot. So it's like kind of a litmus test of how good are you at Slayer.
Interesting. Okay.
Although, obviously not everyone's playing Sploosh. So if you can't play Sploosh, that doesn't mean you're a bad Slayer. That's not what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. Might just mean you don't know how to play Hammer.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, another
Not my
thing that I
strongest.
heard a lot about Sploosh is, oh, it has, high RNG or a lot of shot spread. You're so close to the enemy that doesn't matter, trust me.
yeah. I
think
haven't
of-
been missing a lot of shots today.
Yeah. And if you are gonna miss a few shots, the fire rate is so high, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Ouch pinging in the hopes that my teammates know that they're there. I should just jump in. Oh, maybe not to there. Okay, we're good, we're good. It's
Oh,
fine.
nice!
We're-
Clutch
we're
Hydra,
cool,
Clutch
we're
Hydra.
cool.
Or at least I'm assuming that was the idea.
It was maybe a little bit too long of a flank, but we're in now.
Yep. That's one of the downsides of going for those long Sploosh flanks. Or as I like to call them, the Africa flanks.
Yeah.
So you have to go all around.
Got there by way
to
of
prevent-
Narnia. Uh-oh.
Top 5 gem gets wrecked ones. We need to make a compilation of gem funny moments. Squid epic fails.
I knew they were going to think that I was going that way.
Nice.
You put out a little bit of paint, and it suggests where you're about to go. That's one of the things that I like to do with the curling bomb a lot. Throw it one way and then go someplace else.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. There's a lot of mind games you can do with curling bomb. Because a lot of people will expect you to be inside the curling bomb. But if, like, during neutral you just throw a random curling bomb and you don't follow it, and so then the enemy's like, oh, so the Sploosh isn't following his curling bomb. And then later on you kind of, like, make the enemy think you're not going to follow in, but then you eventually do.
And you can
Or
also just,
something like
like,
that.
make them shoot at the curling bomb trail so that
Yeah.
they reveal their position. Because they're going to want to shoot at it to know whether you're there or not.
That's true. Yeah.
And if they don't start shooting at it, then you go in it, and then you get them.
Mm-hmm. Or another thing is going in with the curling bomb, like, seconds after you threw it, and if they don't paint over it, so you still have the trail.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, where I threw one, waited a second to see if they were going to shoot at it, and then went with it.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Dio. That was helpful. There are a lot of things that I learned about the weapon there, a lot of things I learned about the special and the team comps especially. Appreciate having you on. Is there anything that you would like to plug?
I don't really do the whole social media thing nowadays, so what I'm going to plug is, for everybody watching, you should support competitive Splatoon, specifically with the live streams that are being done of Splatoon. So I'm talking IPL Splatoon, InkTV Splat, Dapple Production, any other tourneys that are happening. Go watch them. Have fun. Spam Twitch chat with a bunch of copy pastas that are related to Splatoon. Don't be annoying, but yeah.
Or maybe a little annoying. Maybe like annoying pop gun is okay.
Yeah, ball gun.
Maybe not everybody else, but pop gun isn't off limits there. So anyway, I'm so sorry, pop gun. Thank you everybody for watching, and to all of you Sploosh goers, I hope you learned something. Have a good one.
Sploosh gang, let's go!